Welcome to Thursday's edition of Big Blue Kickoff Live here on Giants.com as well as the mobile app. He's Jonathan Casillas. I'm Lance Meadow with you for the next 60 minutes and multiple ways you can interact with us here on the program. You give us a ring, 201-939-4513. You can also head to Twitter, hashtag Giants Chat. And as a reminder, you can find the archive of this show and our entire podcast network on the Giants mobile app, podcast platforms everywhere, and at Giants.com/podcast. As we look ahead to Sunday's rematch with the Washington Commanders, they'll wrap up the season series. The Giants won the first matchup back in Week 7 at MetLife Stadium, 14-7. And, Jonathan, this is a different Washington team. I know it's only been a few weeks. They've played 3 games, but they made 2 changes on the offensive line. Chris Paul now at left guard, Tyler Larson at center. Nick Gates actually has been benched. It's not an injury. He's been replaced. And while Sam Howell's still getting sacked, I'm not saying it's clean football, he, though, seems to have a little bit more time. He's getting rid of the football quickly. It's more of a functional offense, I would argue, compared to what we saw, of course, in terms of how the Giants shut down that Washington offense.
Yeah, and Nick Gates, I guess that benching or resetting or whatever the term you want to use, I think that was compliments of Dexter Lawrence, if I'm not mistaken.
Sure.
When I was watching the game, it looked like he had 4 sacks. I think he only got credited for 2.
Yeah, he got 2.
But at halftime, I said he has 4 sacks, because he was just all over the back foot, all over the quarterback.
Yeah.
Such a dominant performance by him. But like you said, the Commanders have taken a step forward in protecting their quarterback. Who, look, I don't know why they're passing so much, because last year I feel like they were a run-dominant team. Even late in games when they were losing, third downs, like they run a football. But no, not with this quarterback. They're, trusting him with, getting that ball out to, I think, very talented receivers that they have. And Sam Howell, I think he does a good job. He held the ball, I think, leading up to that first game a lot longer than I think he has been in the last few weeks. And that's why you see a decrease in the sacks, because the Giants had 6 sacks, if I'm not mistaken.
Season high.
On Sam Howell. And that was kind of like the opening to the Giants, like, oh, okay, we can rush the passer. And, I don't know if that was an anomaly, but the numbers haven't been.
Well, they've had 9 outside of that. So I think you could do the math from that standpoint.
But I look forward. Commanders and Giants, they're always playing tough games. No matter who's doing well, who's not doing well. The Giants and Commanders, they're always playing a 4-quarter football game. Unlike the Cowboys and the Eagles, the Giants don't really play 4 quarters.
Well, these games have been far more competitive and closer. Yeah,
absolutely. And Daniel Jones as a starter, even though I know he's not playing, for the rest of the year, not this game, but he has a good record against the Commanders or the Washington football team, or I don't even know.
Well, the Giants overall
were they the Redskins when he started? When Daniel Jones
2019
started?
was his first year. So yeah.
So he's beaten the different names of these teams over the years, but now you got Tommy DeVito, undrafted. Everybody knows his story. And my thing is, can the Giants show up to play? Because I feel like last week they didn't show up to play, and that was a collective effort. They didn't take advantage early on against, I think, some opportunities that were presented themselves where the Giants did make some plays early in the game, get that 4th down stop early, and then having that interception get them, to the 12-yard line.
12-yard line, yeah, great field position.
Couldn't really do anything off of that.
I'm with you.
And that's the thing. We haven't spoken in a while, but I've been hearing you talk with John and the interviews that you be doing, and we all have the same sentiment. Like, the Giants have to execute, and there's no more excuses about who's playing quarterback, who's playing tackle. Like, that, injuries happen, and I think it ravished New York this year big time, especially early on. And every single game, there's like limited guys going in, and then less guys coming out, which is not good. But we can't keep making excuses. At the end of the day, whoever's out there, all 11 guys on each side of the ball have to execute. And that's what I don't think we have been seeing. We haven't seen the Giants execute for 4 quarters. Defensively, we've seen them do some really good things against the Bills, the Jets, the Commanders. They, ended up, winning the game out of that. But still, offensively, not many points no matter who's playing quarterback. We got life when Tyrod Taylor came in. He didn't really score a lot of points either.
Yeah, I mean, they were still under 20 in that department.
So it's like the Giants have to figure out a way to have some success on offense, because even though the Giants have a win against the Commanders, they're only 14 points. And the defense did a great job in limiting them to only 7. I don't think they're going to be able to do that again. I don't think Dexter Lawrence is going to have that dominant of a game again. So they have to figure out a way to score points against this Commander team because they figured out a way to score points and win games for the Commanders.
Well, especially since, as you mentioned earlier, Sam Howell's leading the NFL in passing yards. So they have no problem airing it out. He spreads the wealth. He got 6 players with at least 250 receiving yards. They've utilized the running backs a lot over the last few weeks, Brian Robinson specifically, and I think that's a product of him getting rid of the football. But as you mentioned, JC, it really doesn't matter at the end of the day what opponent we're talking about going up against the Giants. If you're staying within the 10 to 17 point tally, you're putting stress on all the other facets of your team. And while I would say, okay, here's a Washington defense that they scored 14 points against in the first half, but remember, they didn't do anything in the second half of that game. You don't have Chase Young. You don't have Montez Sweat anymore. Both of those guys have since been traded away. The pass rush is completely different because the 2 guys that have replaced them, one of which is now on the injury report, that being James Smith-Williams and Casey Toohill, nice players, but not necessarily Chase Young and Montez Sweat in terms of their track record. Can the Giants take advantage of a defense that is not manufacturing much of a pass rush and is giving up a boatload of explosive plays? They've given up over 600 yards and 8 touchdowns on plays that go 20-plus air yards. So we're talking about down the field. Now, you and I have had a lot of conversations where we take the piece of paper out, right? And you're like, there's about 17 items that are extremely attractive for the Giants. But football doesn't work like that. And you played the game. You know that. But this is night and day compared to the Dallas Cowboys, okay? This is not DeMarcus Lawrence. This is not Micah Parsons. This is not Dorrance Armstrong. This is not an opportunistic secondary. Regardless of who's under center, if the Giants don't give Tommy DeVito enough time to throw the ball, I'd be surprised compared to what Dallas does. That's understandable. You're talking about one of the best pass rushing units in the NFL. But Washington took a significant hit with the absence of Chase Young and Montez Sweat. And Deron Payne and Jonathan Allen, who are 2 really good players, production-wise this season, they're not putting up the numbers that we've been used to seeing. So when you take all those ingredients into consideration, should the Giants' offensive line be able to hold its own against this group? Absolutely.
Yeah.
On an island, I would say yes. Is that going to come to fruition on Sunday? I don't know, because the Giants have been Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde throughout this season.
Yeah, more, I guess, Dr. Jekyll.
If you want to put it in
the negative
one element, yes. Well, yeah. Depends on how you spin it in terms of the story.
But there's opportunity that lies here for this, Giants versus Commanders on the road. The Commanders remember what happened the first game, though, and I feel like when they come to divisional games, especially in this division, not really the Giants per se, because the Giants really haven't been able to compete. Last year was the Eagles. This year is the Cowboys, and the Giants haven't played the Eagles yet. But the Commanders, they compete very well in the division. They're always a tough team, yeah. The Eagles a run for their money, like we saw a few weeks ago. So this is not a team that you look at on paper like we're doing now and say, okay, obviously they're not as good as Dallas. And then you look at it and say, okay, this is where the Giants can make ground. I'm not even looking really at the Commanders. I think they're a tough out no matter how you put it, especially how they're playing football right now. You're going to have to score points. And the Giants just don't really do that well. So I think it's a tough out. But let's disregard the opponent this week. I just really want to focus on the Giants, because I feel like week in and week out, we come away and we're trying to, analyze every single game, like we do. That's what we're paid to do. And we sit down and try to break it down. But it all comes down to the Giants actually executing. And that goes with the play calling. That goes with, the players actually making the plays. And it all goes down to, can the Giants play really good situational football? And can they scheme up ways to beat you offensively? Because I think because of all of the injuries that happen, especially at the quarterback position, you're not just going to line up and beat teams. Even against, I wouldn't say the lower divisional team, but like not, the strength of the division. The strength of the division is the Eagles and the Cowboys. Now you got the Giants and the Commanders kind of lobbying for that third, fourth. Against a talented team like the Cowboys, the Giants really didn't have a chance. But you give yourself a chance if you can scheme them up. And I'm talking about just man for man, given the injuries, especially at the quarterback position. You're not just going to line up and beat teams. You just don't have enough firepower.
Yeah, you
know?
can't get away with talent alone, is basically what you're saying.
And with Daniel Jones at the helm, even though I don't think this year he was playing that well, but last year we've seen Daniel Jones himself beat teams. Giving the ball to Saquon, a healthy run game, most likely a more likely intact offensive line. That's just not the case this year. The Giants have to figure out ways to exploit whatever they're seeing on film against the Commanders. I watched Cowboys last week against the Giants, who the levels of talent I think are different. I watched them run misdirection plays. I watched them run almost surprising plays off of what they usually run, because it adds an extra element to think about. You know, they added the whole misdirection game, the belly flip, the reverses. You know, and I know they're a team that do stuff like that, but when you're playing a team and you're known for kind of hitting it downhill, because I think that's what Dallas is really known for, you need to throw in stuff off of that.
Sure.
You know, and I feel like the Giants haven't been that creative, whether it's offensively or defensively. You know, I think they're just kind of lining up like, all right, we're going to try to beat these guys. And it's like, I don't know if the Giants can do that, given all the injuries that have happened.
You bring up an interesting point. The C.D. Lamb touchdown is something that comes to mind when he ran around, not necessarily the receiving one. I wonder, and I think you can shed more light on this, considering you understand the dynamics of practice, how much do you think, Jonathan, that's a byproduct of he wasn't with the first team for many weeks until really last week when he knew he was going to be the starter, and they don't want to rock the boat until he's out on the practice field enough, because, you know, how many trickery plays are you willing to implement if the quarterback himself has barely worked with the first team? I'm wondering if that is why, to your point, we haven't seen enough of that, and now as the weeks go by, maybe they'll be more willing to open up the playbook.
Yeah, I think that has something to do with it, but I'm looking at the time before, like Daniel Jones and
so you're talking about the
Taylor,
established guys that they weren't even
Daniel Jones
with.
and Tyrod Taylor, they
and that
really,
I get, sure.
You know, because even when Daniel Jones was healthy, we still were shorthanded. Andrew Thomas played, 2-3 games this year? You know, and Evan Neal missed a lot of time. John Michael Smith was out. You know, you had the carousel amongst the guards throughout the entire season.
Musical chairs is what I prefer, but it's okay. I'll allow carousel.
You know, so the musical chairs that's been playing, and there's no consistency there. And then I think Adam Pugh was so huge, and he does a lot more for, like, when I look at offensive line play, I look at basically, like, who are the leaders in the room? You know, like, who has the tenure in the room? The Giants, besides Andrew Thomas, really didn't have that. They didn't have tenure. They didn't have guys that had adequate experience for a prolonged period of time.
A lot of young
I'm not
guys.
talking about 2 or 3 years. I'm talking about 4, 5, 6, 7 plus. Because if you look at every single offensive line, it's always at least one guy like that. You know, you look at the Eagles, they got, 2 guys with over 10 years experience with Lane Johnson and Kelsey.
Yeah.
You know, and then they got a whole bunch of other guys that has adequate experience. When you look at an offensive line, it's led by one of those old 10-year, 11-year veterans, maybe Pro Bowl guy, whatever the case is. The Giants don't even have that, but adding Pugh gave you that element. And I think you saw it last week when Tommy DeVito got into it, one of the linemen, and then Pugh came to his defense. The Giants need more guys like that. You know, it's not about, for me, it's not always about skill and like technique. It's about want to and will. You know, and the Giants, when it comes to this time of the year, the want to and will, it's only there if you have it, you know, and not to say they don't have it, it's just they don't have a lot of it. They don't have like a whole bunch of Justin Pughs. You know, he's not the most talented offensive lineman. I bet he's not even a top 5 talent on this team, but the want to and will is very high for him. And he's going to play 4 quarters no matter what the score is or anything. And that goes into, you can't see that on paper. You know, it's through experience, it's through trial and tribulation. And the Giants are going through the fire right now, you know, and I think this is going to build a lot of character and it's going to see what this roster is really made of. Because as of right now, the Giants have been getting embarrassed. And like the Raider game, the Jets game and the Raider game for me was like, okay, these are 2 teams that the Giants should have beaten. And the Giants let it slip away and they got embarrassed by the Raiders. That's not skill and technique. I think that's more want to and will. And once it start getting to this difficult time of the season, it's easier for that not to show up. You know, I'm not saying guys are quitting, but it's a lot easier for it not to show up. So the Giants are in a tough spot right now, and they got to find those guys that not only are good technically and skill-wise, but that has that want to and will, because you're going to hit rough spots during the season. Cincinnati had rough spots early in the season.
Yeah, they were 0-3.
The Bills are going through a rough spot right now.
Sure.
San Francisco had 3 games they lost.
Vikings too.
Like you got teams that San Fran is one of the best teams in the league. They lost 3 games straight. They were number 1 in the whole NFL. They lost 3 games straight. All of a sudden, they're like looking on the outside looking in. Depending on what they do in the division. Every year you have rough spots, and it's the 1-2 in the will that gets you through it. The Giants got to find that 1-2 in will for the guys that's on the roster now, because you're not bringing in too many more people. I know people keep going down, but like you're not bringing in Pro Bowl guys.
No, you're not going to get a
time
savior.
of the year like you found in Pugh. But I think that's what the Giants need to find, because it's not always about the X's and O's. It's about the 1-2 and will, and going above the X's and O's. You're not just going to line up and beat the talented teams in the NFL. This is more of your weight class, but the Giants are not leading the league in any statistic. These guys are, meaning they can pass the ball very efficiently. And if the Giants' defense doesn't show up, the Giants cannot be competitive in any games. Their offense is not built for it. Tommy DeVito is not built for it. But Dexter Lawrence, the way he played against the Commanders the first game, if he plays like that this game, the Giants can be in every single game, no matter what they do on offense, because the defense showed flashes of greatness this year. And I want that to be consistent, because that's what the Giants need in order to be competitive. I'm not talking about wins or losses. I'm talking about not getting blown out at home, not getting blown out on the road, on primetime games. The Giants have to find that 1-2 and will, and it goes beyond the X's and O's, and it kind of goes beyond execution too. It's that fight that we saw from, I don't know if I'm seeing it from everybody, but I'm definitely seeing it from Pugh and some guys.
Well, and Pugh also, remember, is a little bit more well-rested than the rest of the roster because he didn't play at the beginning of the season. So I would say,
on that couch, baby.
I hope there's a lot of gas in that tank, considering he didn't go through training camp. But to me, the one statistic that spells out everything you're talking about in terms of the construction of the team, they're dead last in point differential, Jonathan.
Sheesh.
They're minus 148. I want to put that in perspective. The next closest team in the NFL is the New England Patriots, who clearly have their own set of issues. The Patriots are minus 97. Minus 97 versus minus 148, okay? Basic math. There's some distance.
That's a big difference
between both of those teams. So, to your point, they're not built to play from behind.
Yep.
They're not constructed that way, and that's the one way that you allow Washington to gain confidence if you allow them to jump out to an early lead. They did not allow that to happen in the first matchup. One last thing I want to get to before we open up the phone lines. You brought up Dexter Lawrence and how effective he was in the first matchup. We've seen a bit of a tilt with the defensive efficiency, JC, since the Leonard Williams trade. And I don't want to say it's that simplistic that you remove one guy. Just like Washington lost Chase Young and Montez Sweat. But there are other things on the back end that have gone wrong for the Commanders. It's not just that they plucked those 2 guys out. But I do find it interesting that since Leonard Williams was shipped out of town, it does seem as if what's going on up front has changed, because we have not seen a duplication of that Washington game. And I understand some of the offensive lines they've gone up against are different. But the Jets, the Raiders, we're not talking about the who's who of offensive linemen in football. Yeah. And I think it just goes to show you there are players on a defense, and you've seen this firsthand, they are not statistic guys, meaning they're not going to go out and get 50 sacks. They're not going to get tackles for loss. But the attention, the space they eat up does wonders for everybody around them. And I think we're starting to see that's who Leonard Williams was.
Yeah. And it's bigger than the X's and O's. Again, he's one of those want to and will guys.
Yeah, because he has veteran leadership and seniority.
That's one of the guys that I'm talking about.
Exactly.
So when you remove that guy from the locker room, it's going to be not just affect you on the field, it's going to affect you off the field. Because when I came into the league, I went to the New Orleans Saints. I was undrafted, but I was definitely supposed to be drafted. I just had some character concerns, as they say. And I was hurt too.
Just look at his Wisconsin resume. He's not lying, by the way. Yeah. I'm here to help you out.
But
that's
then,
all. Yeah.
I got to the team and I realized there was a guy that played will linebacker. I got a lot of respect for. His name is Scott Shanley. And even though I was a superior athlete to him, his technique was absolutely incredible. Absolutely incredible. And even though I felt like I would have took his job, as in if I would have been healthy my second year and played, I think I'd have been a better player than him overall. I had so much respect for that dude, and anything he said I would do. And I was a young kid when he was older, and I was to get the breakfast guy.
Sure.
I was the
Carry
running
the pads,
errands.
the helmets,
you know what I mean?
Yeah, all that stuff.
But I had unlimited amount of respect for him. And for me, like, I would look up to him, even though I felt like eventually, like, that's my job. I'm coming here to take his job, but it's a respect thing that you have. And for me, it's like, I got to play really well to beat that dude out. So if you think about it, there's guys behind Leonard Williams, they won't play if they're not competitive against Leonard Williams. So he raises the level of play in that defensive line room, not just because he's there, but because he's good. And he's that veteran guy that's helping teach the guys. Scott Shanley taught me a lot from that position, and he knew I was there to take his job. But that is the dynamic of the NFL. When you got good vets in your locker room, it makes your whole team better. And I'm talking about 8, 9, 10 years in guys, not 4, 5, 6 year guys, because there's a little bit of a difference. Like Saquon's that 4 or 5, even Daniel Jones.
He's at the border.
He's at that 4, 5, 6 year guys. I like the older guys. The guys that maybe aren't as good as Daniel Jones and Saquon, like a Pugh. Pugh may not start for the Giants because of, the talent that they have.
Sure.
But to keep him on the roster is huge. He's teaching guys what offensive linemen supposed to look like, how they're supposed to act, how they're supposed to talk, how they're supposed to walk. Because I don't think these guys know how to do it. And how could you? Evan Neal's a young guy. He's a second year. And he hasn't really stacked those consistent games up where he's playing well at a high level. He's been getting scrutinized his whole career. That's not what the NFL is all about. It's the highs and the lows, not just the lows.
Yeah.
So you get somebody like a Pugh to help you out with that, and also on the other side with Leonard Williams, I think he held the defense together, and I didn't know that until he left. And I'm like, okay, now you got to have somebody else. If Dexter wasn't a vocal guy, he might have to start becoming a vocal guy. I don't know how big Leonard Williams was, but I know whenever he spoke, everybody listened. So it's so much bigger than the X's and O's, and I've been thinking about this a lot because I know the Giants, every man is trying to figure out, how did we get to this? How did we get to this past halfway through the season and we only got 2 wins? They're trying to figure it out. I've been there before. I've been there till it's like, I know we got talent. I know I'm pretty good. Yeah. I'm not playing that well, or team's not playing that well. What is happening? So everybody's trying to figure it out, and it's not just the execution of plays. It's a lot to do with the locker room. It's about like how they go into work every single day and their attention to detail before the game even starts, going out there. And I feel like just a lot of failed, missed opportunities and failure to execute. And that's literally been the same thing I've been saying every single week. And until they turn that around, I don't care who's playing quarterback. I don't care who's playing receiver. The Giants will not do well. And I'm talking about this week. The Commanders, they're a good team. Questionable good team. Let's call it like that. But if they play well, they can blow the Giants out.
Oh, they can put points on the board.
Because they can score a lot of points.
Absolutely.
And that's where the Giants need to know, like, any game you can play, if you play well and you catch a team off surprise, you can hit them in the mouth. Whatever, you can be competitive in every single game. That's why there's really not a lot of blowouts. This is very rare stuff that's happening with the Giants. Yeah. That's why the discrepancy of points is so different. It's not like that. Because even though the Patriots, they've got blown out, I think, once or twice.
But they've been in close games,
but they've been close a lot. Even the Commanders, they got 4 wins, I think, on the year, but they've been close in almost every single game that they've played this year. The Giants had to figure out a way, okay, we're losing this game, but let's make it competitive. Let's do some good things on film so we can build on it. They just really haven't done that yet, and they have to figure that out. I don't know what exactly that is. I think Leonard Williams had a little bit to do with that on defense. But, okay, now who's the next guy to step up, not just on the field, but in the locker room? Who's the next veteran? Because Ashawn's a veteran.
Yep, 8 years. Sterling Shepard is a guy. Jihad Ward.
Yeah,
I'm just bringing up the guys that fit your profile.
You got vets there.
Bobby McCain, Mark Lewinsky.
That need to, I think, step up and be, whatever it's the vocal, whatever it's lead by example, whatever the case is, because this season is not done. Like, even though they may be out of the playoffs and they may not be mathematically right, if they win out, they might get in, but, that's far from happening. But you got to figure out what you can do for this team and for yourself so you can possibly be here, and if not, then you can play somewhere else. This is about preservation, whether it's self-preservation, team preservation.
Yeah.
Because if the Giants don't win games, everybody jobs up for sake. And
that's the nature of the NFL.
Everybody. Yeah. So they have to figure out a way to perform better. Mara is not going to be okay with the 2-win season. I know they're going to be picking high in the draft, but John Mara, I see him in the hallways. He don't like the product that's out there sometimes, and it's being more than not. They have to figure out a way to do better, perform better, execute better, because we're going to be talking about something totally different by the end of the year if they don't figure that out.
Well, the turnover rate is massive in the National Football League. So that's why I always say the players, they don't get caught up in draft picks and the order of the draft because they may not be around on the roster the following year. So why get caught up in something that's not going to impact them?
So that's why when somebody was like, Tommy DeVito lives with his mom, I'm like, good for him. He didn't got to worry about paying rent and all that.
Sure.
Because, and I will always say this too, Peyton Manning got cut. He got cut. He was probably the best player in the league. He got cut. And I used to tell people that's my job security. The best player in my job, profession, got cut.
So that's a reminder that if he could get cut, well, then what do you think could happen to me?
So that's the job security of the NFL. And then for me, is like Tommy DeVito, I think he's smart. I think he's staying at home with your mom, I think that's a smart thing to do. Because who knows, like if he was on practice squad, the only way you would move the practice squad, I mean, they can release you or something like that, but you're pretty safe there. You would move a team because a team would activate you and put you on their
they would claim you
roster.
and put you on the 52.
So that's
correct.
That's when you're on that practice squad. You hope somebody do that.
Yeah, and then all of a sudden you're gonna be left with a house or an apartment,
exactly.
and
we've seen so many
able to utilize it. No,
over
I
the
agree.
years, I've seen
Plus,
some
I mean, he
people do
just
that.
got out of college. It's not like he's an old man or anything.
Right, and
like
he's
that.
undrafted too.
Yeah,
he ain't got no money.
I think that should be the last thing on the priority list. Well, I didn't know you were counting his account, so I won't go there.
I
okay.
just was undrafted, so I was there where he was
You
at.
can relate. Yes.
I can very much relate
Absolutely.
to him.
That's why your first year or two, you didn't necessarily go out and buy 1,000 houses, is what you're saying.
We was bunk betting it, bro.
There you go. How about that? Now, were you on the top or the bottom? Can you paint the picture
I'm not
first?
going to do that.
No,
We're not about to go there.
I just wanted to know whether or not you had a wooden stairs to get up.
I ain't going to lie to you. I did have a roommate, though.
Okay.
My first year, I did have a roommate.
I will not judge you.
And then, we was having my daughter, so, I had to get rid of roommate. Can't really have it.
Listen.
I'm having a
life
baby.
comes at you fast, okay?
It does.
JC is the perfect embodiment of that. All right. Thursday's edition of Big Blue Kickoff Live. It's presented by Cadillac, the official luxury vehicle of the New York Football Giants. We're setting the stage for the Giants and the Commanders coming your way Sunday in Landover, Maryland at FedEx Field. Let's open up the phone lines at 201-939-4513 as we move forward here on Big Blue Kickoff Live. Coach Marvin is in Delaware joining us here on the line. What's happening, Coach Marvin? What do you got for us?
How you doing, Lance? Jonathan, how you doing?
All right, what's going on?
We're doing good.
Oh, Jonathan asked me to call this week. He told me last week he wanted me to call, so I'm calling.
I love when he calls.
So now you're putting out requests for callers? Is that how it's working? I didn't realize that.
And we have good conversation. I always love his perspective and appreciate it. He's a coach, but you can tell that, he's played the game. At least he understands the game well enough to kind of get that perspective, from that first, hand point of view.
Yeah, I grew up in the same area you grew up, John. I think you were from Patterson?
Jersey City.
Jersey City. Oh, because I'm from Newark. Newark, New Jersey.
Those are not too far away.
In the same ballpark, yes.
Yeah. They got Washington this week. Jonathan hit everything I pre-think about what I'm going to talk about, and that was where I was going, is where you guys are today. Because you're in a situation now, body language, when you see that body language, it doesn't look good. I watched them in that Cowboys game. The secondary looked bad. It's just their body language just wasn't good. I don't know if it had to do with Leonard Williams getting traded, but everybody's body language wasn't in that game. And as a coach, if I see that, there's something I may have to do, because I know they're feeling bad with 2 wins. And the coaches feel just as horrible with 2 wins. People may think that they lose these games and they want to get fired. No, everybody wants to win. Everybody can't. What I would do is I would come in, and what I want to do is change the atmosphere. I think, John, you hit it on. You got to be a little more creative coaching-wise. I would come up with something, because the receivers are not getting open. And I said this one time before, maybe we need to run more crossing routes. Maybe we need to run more rub routes, things to free people up rather than letting them play one-on-one. Move guys in motion a little more and try to get free, just to keep these guys, keep their hands off the receivers. And I know the line haven't been playing well, But
yeah, because remember,
I
don't mean to cut you off, Coach Marvin, but there was a play in the red zone against the Cowboys where there was a crossing route, and DeVito just did not have enough time to even get rid of the football because the pressure came so fast. So, I mean, it's, in theory, a sound move, but that doesn't necessarily always get executed to perfection.
And you're right. But what I'm saying, my thing is, I have to do something. I can't get in the wishbone and just start running wishbone formations. Yeah. So you're right, and that's why I said the line sometimes not giving them. And you're definitely right, Lance. Sometimes the execution is not there. But I have to get them somehow to compete. So what I have to do is change the atmosphere all week. And I would say to them, think about the last time you had fun playing. And if you think about the last time you had fun, your best time playing, I would say 99.9% of those times you won those games.
Yeah.
So I have to figure out, we're going to try to have fun. I'm going to have music playing. We're just going to play loose. We're going to practice loose and just try to change their body language into when they're getting ready to play these games, because this is going to be a tough game. I don't know if we can win this game, but I just want them to compete. I always said to my teams, there's three levels we're going to have to go through for me to find out what kind of team you are. When you're playing, the first thing I got to know is, can you compete? Because if you can't compete, you can't win. The second thing I want to do is, if I find out you can't compete, then let's compete and put ourselves in position to beat teams that we know we can beat. And then the big one is being not just winning games, but being a winner. And the only way you can be a winner if you compete and you beat teams that you're not supposed to beat. Then that's when you become a winner. So those levels you have to go through. For some reason, I don't think we ever got to the part to say we are winners. I think we won games last year that we could win, or we should win.
Well, look at how many close games they played. So, I think that's evident. They weren't running away with all those wins.
That's right. And then every time we played somebody that was a good team, Philadelphia, the Cowboys, they put it on us hard.
Yeah.
Minnesota was not as good as we thought they were. And I always said when we played them the first time, that was a team I would have said to my team, we're going to see them again.
Yeah.
I don't care where we go, we're going to see them again, and we're going to show them what we really are after the first time they played them, and they did beat them. So they're not really a winning team. They're not winners. But we took a step back, and it seemed like we fell all the way back to where we're not even competing. So they have to figure out a way how we want to compete. Don't worry about winning. Don't worry about losing. Just compete, and then what happens at the end will dictate who wins or lose.
Sure.
And that's where I would try to get their minds in that state. Just compete. Don't worry about the scoreboard. Compete, compete, compete. When the fourth quarter comes, then we're going to see where we stand. And I think that's all they can do the rest of the way, because you got to find out what we have.
All right, Coach Marvin.
So,
appreciate the phone call. You got it.
Talking to you.
Thanks,
Absolutely.
Mark.
It's interesting what he was talking about. I want to bring another team into the equation. If you notice what Antonio Pierce did with the Raiders, who coincidentally just played the Giants, they put up a basketball court he was talking about. I don't know if you saw this. I don't know if it was in the locker room or it was somewhere in the facility, and guys were just shooting hoops, just to get back to having fun. Playing loose. Yep. And is that the reason why they won against the Giants and the Jets? I don't know. But it certainly had a positive impact on the team. Now, does Brian Dable have to do that? Every coach is different. And you should also, my feeling as a coach is you should do what's natural to you. Because, you could speak of this. I think players will notice if a coach is all of a sudden getting out of character and not following what he normally does.
To your locker room.
That could go the opposite way.
Yes, it will.
Yeah.
But he does bring up a good point. I didn't know the Raiders did that. But the Raiders, they wanted something new. I think they had that player meeting with the coaches there, and everybody kind of pointed at the head coach or whatever. Which was, I don't know, that's a lot. But I knew going into the Raider game that this wasn't the Raider team that we saw, I guess the week before they played. Was it Detroit?
Yes, that was the Monday night game. It was a short week, correct.
And they looked horrible.
The defense was shredded. Yeah.
And I knew that wasn't going to be the team that showed up on Sunday. This is almost like a revitalized type of team the Giants, I think, need to figure out how to revitalize this team because they're not as bad, I don't think so, as 49-17 or 40-0. I don't think that the Giants are that bad. I just think they get into this, oh, we're losing, and then not to say that they don't play, they don't fight, but like it's almost like if you got a really good player, right, and he's on a team that hasn't won games, it's going to be to a point where even though he's having a decent game, it's like you're not going to try at 110%. Maybe you're only giving 98%, but you're not going to try that 110% when you know it's going to be a loss. It's almost going to be in vain, and the Giants had to figure out a way to get back to getting the most out of all of the players that are actively playing, because you can't ask for Daniel Jones to be healthy. He ain't going to be healthy. But whoever's playing, to play at not 98 or 100, to push it to 110%. And I'm talking about like going after the ball. Like I watched, I guess it was the Commander game, even the Bills game with this defense. Like I watched the defense literally, like they look different. It's the same guys, but they look different in those games. It looked like they got off the blocks a lot more population to the ball. And that's where you see the turnovers being created. Yeah. You got people around the football. And look, I remember my senior year in college, I was hurt. And the coaches got on me about running to the football. But I was hurt, so I didn't do it all the time. I would do it when the play wasn't coming to me, right? Like if it was coming to me, I'm after it. But if it was like a ball across the field and I'm backside, like I probably won't take off running. But this is the thing, though. If anybody knows anything I did in college, what I did a lot of, I ran down ball carriers, like from the opposite side of the field. So if I decide not to do that because I'm hurt, yeah, it's a good reason. I don't want to get hurt, but at the same time, it's like I didn't do that because I was hurt and we weren't playing at that.
So you didn't think it was necessarily worth it, is what you're saying?
So I made a conscious decision not to do that. You know what I mean? And that was bad on me, but like I was a really good player, and I always made plays like that. But people make those choices, and you never really see that. Like you don't really see a corner really not running to the ball or not trying to get there, like running as fast as he can on the backside. You didn't really see stuff like that. He can do a little fake jog,
correct,
or even run at 80%.
Right. Yeah.
But like it's a difference to get your guys to play at that high 110%, give everything you got, and you can't even do nothing after the game. Or you're getting at 80, 90% to make it look really good, but it's not really the effort that can maximize on that player's potential. And I think the Giants are in that ball game to where they're getting like 80 to 90% out of their guys instead of 110.
It's interesting you went there because the one thing, though, that I would bring up, if it's a veteran team, I get that. Because there's been guys that have been in the league for several years and they're thinking about long-term health and they've been through this and done this. The defense has a lot of youth,
yes.
JC. So, and I'm just going to throw out some names. I'm not accusing the players of doing what you're saying, nor are you. But a guy like Deonte Banks, who's in his first NFL season, if that even got into his mind in any capacity, I would say something is very wrong because he hasn't even played one full season. So, for example, if you have a Dory, okay, I'm not saying it's acceptable. Yeah. I get it. Dory's been through.
You understand because he's been around
but
a little bit
I
longer.
would never understand that thought process for a player that's in his first or his second year in the NFL.
I just think it's human nature. I think it's human nature, not to coast or anything like that. I don't think that. I just think that, I'm vividly remember myself doing it.
Sure.
Like literally selling out, like, playing through injuries, like being all messed up, and then also like I remember me not going as hard and I regretted it. You know what I mean? Like I regretted it. And sometimes it was on teams that weren't that good, or we were losing bad or whatever the case was. But I remember when I went to New Orleans and I didn't get drafted, but the coach Joe Vitt, he told me, he was like, the reason why we wanted you here was because against Illinois and I think it was Ohio State, we were losing big time. And in Penn State, I was making plays in the fourth quarter, running guys down.
So they liked your
big
hustle.
Hits.
Yeah.
But it was like when the stuff hit the fan, you were still playing hard. You know, and I think that was embodiment of me, my character.
Yeah.
But even me doing that, I would take a play off here and there, like I said, if it was away from me. You know, and I think you make conscious decisions like that. I don't think it happens a lot, but it could be one guy in one play that could equal a touchdown. It could be one guy in one play, it could be a 20-yard, you know,
it adds up in the long run.
missed sack because you're a little bit late. You know what I mean? And like all of those things, I think they have to be addressed, and you have to, I guess, reinvigorate or get the guys back involved into what's important about football. You know, it's yes, the tackling and then also the blocking and like, you know, the technique stuff. But it's heart, man. It's your effort, you know, and if you're not selling out every single play, it's a detriment not to you but to the team, or not to just to the team but for yourself. You know, and I think they have to kind of revitalize the guys and remind them like what keeps you in the league. Winning games is fun, but what keeps you in the league is your own personal production. Yes, your team needs to win games to stay intact, but what keeps you in the league for a long period of time is your personal production. And guys can't forget that, you know, and not to say that they in that ballpark right now. It's just hard because I've been on a team where you're past the halfway point and you only got 1 or 2 wins. It's hard to say I'm gonna give 110% today at practice. You know what I mean? Like it's really difficult to do that. They got to find a way, because your point that you made, the Raiders found a way to do that, and it was a new coach hired, and he figured out, you know, how to kind of get to them on a psychological level to get the most out of them. And I think you will see better Raider play as the season goes on. The Giants have to figure out a way to invigorate the guys and get that back out of them, because the Giants got talent. They just haven't performed up to the talent that we know they have. Darren Waller's out, and you got other guys that are out, but you still have capable guys. Bellinger's good. Cager had a touchdown. You know, went for him twice in the red zone. You know, like the Giants have guys. They just got to be able to execute and give that 110%, which I don't know if they've been doing all year. You know, I think we're getting good hustle out of them, but there's a difference in some of these games when you watch, especially when you look at them defensively. Because you've seen them be great at times, and then you also seen them not be good at all.
It's been a roller coaster.
And I don't think that's just X's and O's. That's a lot to do with each individual player giving that overall 110% effort. Because you can't really tell from film. You can't. But you can tell if you look at a guy's play for 7 games and you look at a guy's play for 7 games. You know, if you could tell, like, all right, he's obviously playing a lot harder in the first 7 games or the last 7 games. It's very difficult to do that, but I had to do that with myself. I didn't do that with no one else. I don't do that with none of these players. I'm just talking about me personally. And I'm a guy that I feel like you couldn't question my effort, but there was some times where I wasn't going 110.
But that was a conversation you were having with yourself, essentially.
Yes, and the reason why I'm speaking about it right now, because all of these guys are having internal conversations with themselves. They want to figure out what they can do to help this team. That's what you do when you're on a team. You want to figure out, what can I do personally to give everything I got and more to get this team to the next level. And I think that's on the coaches, that's on the staff, to figure out the best way to help them answer that question. I don't know what that is. The Raiders are starting to do stuff and team building, like outside of the building, getting guys together. That's why I like when Pugh started taking the guys to dinner. I think that's a good thing to do, because now you're sitting there talking to your guys. Now you feel like, man, I can't let this dude down.
You're bonding.
He going home to his wife and his young baby. You know what I'm saying? Like, you know, everything's riding on this for him. You know, and then you start really like playing for the next guy, and that's when you go that extra 10% above 100. Because you play 100 for yourself, all of a sudden you want to play for him because his new baby was just born. You know what I mean? Like you find something in your guy next to you, and it's hard to do that when you're not communicating and hanging out outside of football.
No, I think that's a great point. You personalize the individuals around you. They're not just players who are putting on uniforms. They're people.
Yeah. And
they're human beings at the end of the day. They have families and obligations and so forth. Speaking of playing through injuries, we should mention on yesterday's injury report, Thursday is going to come out after we get off the airwaves here. Secondary is still banged up. Dory is in concussion protocol. You've got Deonte Banks nursing an ankle injury, Cordell Flott shoulder injury. The last 2 were limited. Dory obviously is not practicing. We talked about Washington with Sam Howell leading the NFL in passing yards. You want to make sure you have the guys on the back end that can hold their own because, once again, Sam Howell does not play favorites. He will spread the wealth, the tight ends, the wide receivers, the running backs, you name it. Let's head back to the phone lines. We check in with Dave in Dallas here on BBKL. What's happening, Dave?
Oh, hi, guys. I've got a question for Jonathan, and you guys just about answered it. What does a player think going all out? If I get hurt now and go on IR, do I stand to lose my job to a younger stud? And I think that mentality is coming into play on this team right now. I'll hang up and listen to your answer on the line. Thanks,
all right, Dave.
Guys.
Yep, appreciate the phone call.
Yeah, it's basically what I was just saying, because that is something that you should be wary of, because if you get hurt, it does affect your future, But for me, selling out is not putting yourself into the risk of being hurt. Playing football puts you in the risk of being hurt. So I never I guess made business decisions in terms of that. I did it personally because I knew I couldn't hit people in the face anymore for my neck's sake. But no, man, like
you can get hurt doing anything, right?
Yes, it's what you sign up for, for the game of football, and I feel like you owe it to your teammates, to yourself, to actually give that 100 to 110%, every single game, because you sign up to play ball. That means you're signing up to be injured. That's what that means, and I tell parents that all the time. The kid's 7, 8 years old. I said, your kid's going to get hurt, right? They're like, oh, yeah. I'm like, no, for real. He's going to get hurt.
It's a guarantee, yeah.
Like he's going to have some type of surgery to reconstruct something. And they look at me like, I'm serious. It's going to happen. Are you okay with that? You know what I mean? Like, because it's the truth. It's the truth. And what people don't really know is, despite all of that, you still got to go out and perform. Like you know you're going to get hurt. There's going to be ups and downs, peaks and valleys, but you still got to go out there and perform at a high level for you to play any more than 1 year in the league. This is a production business. And when people don't start producing, when teams don't start producing, that's when everything starts getting cloudy. And I like Daboll, I like Shane. I just feel like there's an unfortunate situation to have this year. Last year they overachieved, this year they underachieved. And they got to figure out a way to get the most out of their players this year. That's just what it is.
And what I'll add to that, based on the last caller's question, is I go back to the youth on this roster. So, for example, look at the players that are getting out there more often than not. On offense, Jalen Hyatt, first year. Wan'Dale Robinson, second year, and his rookie year was interrupted because of injury.
Basically a rookie
so
again.
You look at the receivers, Isaiah Hodgins, he's a guy that didn't have much notoriety, right, as a player until all of a sudden he was brought into the Giants, got his opportunity, and now you see his numbers are not anywhere near where he was last season. So he's not in a position where he could take anything for granted. Daniel Bellinger is only in his second year in the NFL. Lawrence Cager is a guy that's jumped from team to team. He's been on the practice squad. I mean, I just named you a boatload of offensive personnel that they're looking to secure their future beyond this season. And then on defense, the young corners, Azeez Ojulari has been in and out of the lineup due to injuries. Kayvon Thibodeau's only in year 2. Micah McFadden, who is one of the best players, let's face it, on defense this season, right?
Well.
He's in year 2. So if you had a conversation with him, I would expect him to say, I don't care if the Giants won 1 game, won 10 games, or won something in between. That man is balling. You cannot question his intensity and his energy, because I think he's looking at himself and he's saying, coming into the year, remember, there was questions about whether or not he was going to win a starting job.
Yeah. Well, that was on Beavers.
Correct. And the Beavers didn't even make the roster.
Yeah.
So he went from competing for a spot on the 53 to winning the job outright to becoming one of the heart and soul players on the defensive side of the ball.
Big time.
Now, is everyone cut from the same cloth as Micah McFadden? JC, no, I'm not going that far. But my point is, when the question is posed, how concerned do you have to be for this team right now that guys are not thinking the way that you were talking about, that, oh my God, my job is at jeopardy. I just outlined so many young players that are in year 1, year 2. I find it hard to believe that the coaches haven't, hammered that into their heads. You remember your first year in the league. You must have had some conversation with veterans or coaches where they were telling you, hey, you want to hang around in the NFL? you better understand that there are veterans that could be cut tomorrow who may not survive. And you gave the Peyton Manning example, which I think pretty much spells it out. And, I mean, just a quick side note before I get your reaction, the Joe Vitt story, which was fantastic, by the way, and I appreciate you sharing that, that should be something that every player should be told. The fact that your hustle in blowouts in college caught the attention when they were scouting for the draft, it's a reminder you never know, Jonathan, who's watching. You never know. So if you're saying to yourself, we're down by 27, it's the fourth quarter of a college game, I'm a senior, I'm thinking NFL draft, maybe a team takes you a round earlier because in blowouts, they saw you running around the field. Just some food for thought I think some other guys should digest.
In the play.
Exactly.
You know, and the Giants, I don't think they're showing that. I'm not saying they're not that. I don't think they're showing that.
At least consistently.
Yes. Yeah. And I think you see that from the last couple of weeks. You know, like you want to see some type of fight, you know, and the Giants did score 17 points. That was more than they scored week 1 with a healthy Daniel Jones. You know, so.
And it all came in the second half when the game was out of hand. At that point.
17 points.
Yeah, that's why, to me, and I know Brian Dable was asked about this, I don't see the lack of effort. I mean, once again, if we put individual players under the microscope and you through your player's lens, maybe you could tell whether a guy is doing
it's so hard
running
like
motion or not.
You would have to literally take the games that you feel like they played 110% against, and it can't be one play versus one play. It got to be like 100 plays versus 100 plays. Okay, he's obviously playing. You know what I mean? Like, it's not easy to see it because I'm not talking about somebody not giving effort. I'm talking about somebody giving that 90 to 100% instead of 100 to 110. You know, like you see guys make amazing plays all the time, like Max Crosby. You can't say Max Crosby doesn't play at 100 to 110.
Well, the guy doesn't come off the field, so.
Like, you know what I mean? Like, and he's a different guy. He's a different animal.
Is he ever?
He's like probably the most. He probably has the highest engine and motor in anybody in the NFL. But like guys like that, you get motivated, you know, when you see that, you know, as a guy that's sitting behind him or sitting next to him, you know, and not to say the Giants don't have anybody that can produce that type of energy and that motion, but they have to do it. Like it can't be like these games where, I mean, Dallas rested their starters for at least a quarter.
Oh, yeah. By the time we got to the fourth, Cooper Rush came in.
You know,
so
and
they were not
as you can
starters.
see, the Cowboys, they don't care about the Giants. They're not about to take it easy. No team is going to take it easy, especially
Nor
not
should
in this
they.
division.
That's not their job.
Nor should they. And then I
heard
a question that was asked after the game, like, do you think they ran up the score? There's no such thing in the
football.
NFL.
I mean,
no, it's not. It's the NFL.
Okay, well,
because college football, there's such thing as running the score up.
Yeah, but
that's what they try to get to the playoffs. You know, like this is
correct,
the story.
Because of the style points
and they do it so they can get the playoffs.
I get it.
They do it here because why would I stop? Why would I stop? You're a professional team.
Yeah, I mean, I wouldn't have a problem with it
I'm not going to put my
regardless.
backup in and try to. I'm going to run my offense with my backup, and if you can't stop my offense, I don't care. You know, so don't be asking questions like that. And I'm talking to the media. There's no such thing. There's no such thing as running up the score. If the Cowboys could have scored 70, they would have. They don't care, you know, and it makes them look better. You know,
Sure.
But the Giants right now, they have an opportunity against a team that the Giants, I think, have handled well in the past. You know, the Giants have a good record against the Commanders. The Commanders understand all of that. You're going to get a good effort from them. They're going to give you their best effort. And the Giants have to play at that 100 to 110%, or it won't be competitive because the Commanders, they're not the bottom of the league. They're right somewhere in the middle. And that team, they played good games against Seattle, they lost. Played a good games against Philly, they lost. And they got some wins under their belt too, 4 of them. You know, so this team is a team that it's a winnable game, but Dallas is a winnable game. And I say winnable percentages, of course, right? You know, percentages.
Yeah, I was wondering where you were going with that.
It's a lot higher than the Commanders. But I did see on ESPN they got 70% win for the Commanders, that they're going to win.
Oh, in terms of who's favored?
It was last week, it was 90%, but it's still a chance, is what I'm trying to say. You know, and even though it was only a 10% chance, there's always a chance.
Jim Carrey from Dumb and Dumber. That's what you're saying.
Jim Carrey.
There's still a chance.
Yeah.
Yes.
There's still a chance. So you say there's a chance.
Yes.
Yeah, but what I'm saying is, if it doesn't matter who the opponent is, I said this one of my first things I said earlier. It doesn't matter who the opponent is. The Giants have to figure out how to get back to playing really complementary football, execute whenever they're on the field, offensively, defensively, and special teams. And we just really haven't seen them put 4 quarters together, no matter who the opponent. Because we played, I think, the top of the NFL right now in San Fran and Dallas, and then the middle of the pack in Seattle, and then we also played, I think lower end teams in the Raiders.
Sure.
And none of those games they played 4 quarters. So it doesn't matter who the opponent is. The Giants have to figure out upon themselves, no matter who they're going against, Dallas, Commanders, whoever. They have to figure out how to execute for 4 quarters and how to play good situational football. Lance, we haven't seen it yet.
And look at their win against Arizona. That's a product of 2 quarters worth of football, right? If that doesn't happen, and they won by the chin. Yeah. So, that to me spells it out perfectly. I just want to emphasize your last point about Washington's ability to put points on the board. 2 of their last 3 games. Seattle, they scored 26, and against the Eagles, of all teams, they put up 31 in that game.
Yep.
And they played the Eagles tough the first time.
Did they go to overtime?
34-31 in the first matchup. Yeah. So the Giants, and I don't think anybody on the roster is taking anything for granted. You can't when you win 2 games. But this Washington team is a bit different than the one we saw in Week 7.
Yeah, they're better.
Just because of Sam Howell's got more experience, and the offensive line has changed things
And I think when you look at the 2 teams, I'm not saying the Giants are worse, but the record has been, and the Commanders actually won some games since then, and I feel like they've been competitive in all of their games that they played in, and the Giants have not been competitive. So yes, they lost some guys along the defensive line, but they're also leading the league in passing yards, meaning on offense they're going to be able to score some points. The Giants will have to do a good job when they get to the red zone, making them kick field goals, which I think the Giants been doing a decent job at. You take the Cowboys game away. But besides, even that, early in the game, they was able to stop them, get a couple stops early in that game. But the Giants have to put together a game where they play 4 quarters of good, complementary football, and I'm still waiting for that day to happen.
Well, if you look at the first matchup, the Sterling Shepard muff punt set up Washington's lone score. Other than that, they didn't move the football. But once again, we talked about the offense is different. And then the Giants' offense, I go back to getting the ball at the 12-yard line against the Cowboys and not being able to score in that situation. You get that against a Washington team, you have to capitalize under those circumstances. So that's the in and out of the Giants-Commanders game coming your way on Sunday at Landover, Maryland at FedEx Field. We appreciate everybody tuning in to Thursday's edition of Big Blue Kickoff Live. Today's episode, part of the Giants platforms everywhere and Giants.com/podcast. For Jonathan Casillas, I'm Lance Meadows. Stay locked to Giants.com for all the latest, and we'll speak to you on Friday right here on Big Blue Kickoff Live. Have a good one.